Good evening and welcome to it. You're watching the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Sibs Matiela, and I'm coming to you live and direct from the property show happening at the Sandton Convention Centre in the heart of Sandton CBD in Johannesburg, South Africa. We have been telling you all month that all roads lead to the property show. If you've been unable to make it, couldn't join us virtually, we have elected to be kind and benevolent and bring you all of the experts from the property show to the podcast to answer all of your burning questions that you would have asked if you'd made it here today. Joining me in studio, I have Bruno Simao, who is the CEO of Bruno Simao Attorneys. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. Every time I hear your name, I just want to sing, "We don't talk about Bruno."
I get that a lot.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
And then people sing it at you like I just did now.
They do.
Okay. Bruno, tell me about the property show. What's the vibe? How was it?
Fantastic. Today's vibe packed, absolutely packed. A lot of inquisitive people. They loved some of the topics that we spoke about. I was on stage twice. The first time I just spoke about tenant and leasing management, and that is obviously a very hot topic. People want to know how to, if investing in properties, how they deal with the tenants, how the tenants deal with landlords, and then we spoke about alternative options to selling, and that also seemed to intrigue the crowd quite a bit. So yeah, exciting, like very packed.
Okay, I'll ask you more about those things later, but right now I want to ask, I'm buying a home for the first time, not me, haven't won the Powerball yet, crossing fingers, it is Saturday, it might be my night, but what is the legal stuff that I need to know when it comes to this? What are the things, the common faux pas, would you say, that first-time home buyers make when it comes to the legality of things?
Sure. So what's actually interesting about what you said, buying a home but having to win the lotto to do it, there's so many different alternatives, and I think that's what we mentioned. It might be something to get into later because there's different ways to get into property, and it ties into the legal stuff because it really depends how you engage the sellers. It depends on the contracts that you use. So for example, if you can't afford to get a bond at the bank, we work a lot with installment sale agreements, which allows someone to buy a property, but instead of if they lack affordability and the banks aren't willing to give them money, they can buy it over time. As long as the seller gets something that they feel secure with, you can start paying them on a monthly basis. And most of the time, if you cover their bonds, as an example, the sellers are more than willing to sell the property that way. So the contracts are different. So if we look at your traditional buyer or traditional seller and your normal contracts, what I find as a pitfall, so let's say we pick one or two things just to really focus our attention on. What we're seeing nowadays a lot of is people don't understand the binding nature of a contract. And it seems like a very simple thing to start off with. And normally you go, there's a contract, so let's move on to the more complex clauses. But the binding nature of a contract is something that I also see a lot with lease agreements, where you sign a 12-month, but I'm giving notice. Or you sign a contract and you decide you're changing your mind, you don't want to buy the property anymore. And just something like that is just a red flag. People need to realize when they get into these deals, more often than not, there is no way out, especially if you're going through estate agents, for example. They've done their job. They are going to ask for commission to be paid from either the seller or the purchaser. So because of the binding nature of the contract, you can't just walk away from it just because you decide that you no longer want the property. And that kind of ties into the second point as an example, where we start speaking about suspensive conditions. So a suspensive condition is actually a great tool for a purchaser because it allows the contract not to be binding until certain conditions are met. So as an example, I want to buy the property from you, but I don't want to commit just yet until I know that the bank's willing to give me money so that I can buy it from you. So give me 14 days. You agree to sell it to me, but give me 14 days to try get some money from the bank. And if they say yes, then we're bound. If they say no, I'm allowed to walk away from the contract without any ramifications. Even the estate agents can't charge commission or anything like that. So one of the pitfalls, again, that we notice is some contracts, especially through auction houses or some private contracts, don't have suspensive conditions, and people just make the assumption that they're there. So for example, if you buy at a share of sale and execution, there is no suspensive condition. So once you bid and that hammer falls, you're bound and you can't get out of that contract unless you breach, and then you obviously might suffer damages. You'll have to pay the sheriff, and the like.
Okay, legally binding. Your point is
Yeah.
before you sign anything and become legally bound and
Yeah.
unable to remove yourself or extract yourself from the
Sure.
situation, read the thing and understand exactly
Absolutely.
what you're agreeing to do.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
seems like a simple thing to.
Intuitive. Yes.
What would you advise a first-time home buyer to pay specific attention to, other than this, read before you sign? But when they initiate the process of buying their first property, what must they pay specific attention to?
Sure. So if you're comfortable with the legal terms and the contract suspensive conditions, that sort of thing, and you understand what you're getting into, the next thing that we notice causes a bit of problems is the context of defects in the property, right? And this is even with new properties, because we've actually seen quite a lot of this with developers, where the developers haven't built to spec, and then when the snag list comes in, it's there's a lot of problems that weren't anticipated, and the expectations weren't managed. So you were expecting certain fittings and finishes to the property, and they're not there, or they're not available.
Because that's what they showed you in the picture, first of all.
Exactly.
And secondly, it's a new development. You just assume that everything has been done by the book.
Exactly. And then there's defects, and then you find out things don't work, or there's damp because it wasn't done properly. So what we do a lot of is just to make sure that when you're buying the property, make sure that you understand the defect component to it. So if you're buying a property privately and Consumer Protection Act doesn't apply, simply if I'm a seller and I'm the homeowner, right? I'm not running a business, I'm just selling my property. Consumer Protection Act doesn't apply.
It's null and void.
So what happens there is the footstoots. If there's a footstoots clause in there, it will actually protect the seller.
Footstoots meaning as is.
Yeah.
Take it as it is. This is what we're selling you. This is what we're giving you. Give us our money so we can go to Dubai.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the problem is, if the Consumer Protection Act doesn't protect you because you're not buying from a supplier, you don't realize now that you've got no recourse. So you buy as is. You're assuming that you might have recourse if there's something and you didn't realize, but that footstoots clause, unless the seller intentionally hid it, you're stuck with the property with a defect. And if the seller didn't know about it, you've got no recourse against the seller. And we had a case like that once where the seller didn't realize, because he'd only owned the property for 6 months during the winter months. And he didn't realize that because of the way the driveway was built, when it rained, all the water basically flooded the front of the house and actually started seeping into the foundations.
No.
And it was sold footstoots. He only owned it for 6 months. He had no idea because he was never there during the summer rains. And the purchaser didn't have recourse because it wasn't intentional and the footstoots covered it.
So what did that person do?
No, it's then you have to undertake the costs of like the engineering.
It's for your own account?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That
Unfortunately,
sucks.
so you have to be very careful. You do have to. I mean, for example, home inspectors are there for a reason.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I mean, we just spoke to a home inspector, and the things that have been found, but that would be blind to the naked eye, I suppose.
Yeah.
You don't know how to figure out what if the crack in the wall is just like a polyfiller crack, or if it's it's in the foundations,
Structural,
and you've
yeah.
got
Yeah, absolutely.
or if a painting on a ceiling is like, is it was there a stain there, or is the roof about to cave in because there's water in there?
Yeah, because you don't climb into the roof. And they do. The first thing they do is climb into the roof because they know where a lot of the costs are. Some things are more visible than others. They can see cracks through paint. It's a Superman. It's a superhuman ability. I've got no idea how they do it, but they do it.
How does your company help first-time home buyers?
So we help this together because remember, conveyance's task, if we're speaking about the conveyancing process now, is a little bit more than just sign these documents and off we go. The transfer goes through.
La, la, la.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not a tick box exercise, and it shouldn't be a tick box exercise because unfortunately we're living in a world now where there's a lot of laws, a lot of protections, a lot of rights, but certain loopholes, and people understand these, but a first-time home buyer might not. So as a conveyancer, it's important that you're getting the right education. So you're either getting this education from somebody else, like from a network or something, or you're at least engaging with the conveyancers going, I'm worried about this. I don't want to sign the contract that says this. What do I do? Oh, okay. Well, we work with home inspectors. Send them out, get a report from them, attach the report, even get the seller to sign off on the report to say, well, I agree, these are defects. I don't know of anything else. And we help the buyers put the deal together. But obviously that's if we get appointed as a conveyancer, and that's obviously sometimes difficult because the seller gets to appoint the conveyancer.
Why?
It's a standard. It's become a standard practice. So there's it started off because the seller had the most vested interest, being the property. So the seller was entitled to appoint someone because of his vested interest. He wanted to make sure that his interests were taken care of. But times have changed, and now the problem is that there is an argument that counters that to say, well, the purchaser actually has also a vested interest because they take out a bond. Now it's a huge cash amount. We know the property is not going to transfer, so their rights also need to be looked after. So we do offer assistance to purchasers. The downside obviously is then there's a cost component here, and then there's a cost component to the other conveyancers. But we do offer that assistance if they need, and a lot of them do come to us and say, I'd rather just pay you X amount and just get you to help us and deal with the conveyancers because you know more than what we do. But a lot of the times purchasers are now capable of actually leveraging and insisting that they appoint their own conveyancers, be it because they've got a relationship with the conveyancer, or maybe they're getting a discount on the rate, or whatever the case is. It is starting to happen more and more.
Bruno, are you sharing these gems with everyone at the property show?
Well, today I was speaking about something else, but if they want to give me extra slots, I'm more than happy.
Because I feel like these gems you've been holding on to, and only now you're answering these questions. Listen, for you, what is the value of something like the property show? Obviously, you have a world of expertise and so much knowledge that you've got to share with people. So what would the benefit be for you to participate in something like this?
So look, there's multiple reasons. So for starters, I work very closely with SAPIN, which is the SA Property Investors Network. So with SAPIN, we do a lot of education. And I feel like the property show is a nice place to get people in the room and start getting educated. So gems like this, as you mentioned, these are things we speak about on a monthly basis. There's webinars, there's events where we allow people to get more comfortable with the idea of property. And I think that's the problem. We look at property as this massive asset, and the person buying it for the first time is intimidated. But when we start dealing with investors, as an example, that have bought their second, their third, their fourth, they gradually start becoming more comfortable with it. And that's what we're trying to do, but right from the beginning, so that by the time you enter into your first contract, it's like, I'm good. I know, I understand the basics of it. So that's one of the benefits of the property show, is getting the people in the room, working with the like of SAPIN, for example, private property, and getting this education out there and just helping the people. Because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily it's not direct business. It's helping people. And one day, if they liked your help, if they like you, they'll come knocking on the door and ask me to help them with something else. And that's okay. But for now, it's just about letting them know that they're not alone. There's a plan for everything. We've done this before 1 million times.
Listen, if you like Bruno and you'd like some of his help, how do people find you?
So you can go to my website. Should I spell it out? Or,
yeah, sure.
Okay, so it's quite a long website, unfortunately. So it's www. Well, if you know my name.
Bruno, you know what? Your name is actually at the bottom of the screen. So
fine. Yeah, let's stick with that. So it's Bruno Simao Law. So if my name, surname, law at the end, .co.za.
Perfect. That's
sure.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being at the property show and sharing all of these gems that people really need to know. I hope as the property show expands to different regions, Durban, Cape Town, and all of the plans that private property has for the show, I hope, we have more people like you who are just willing to step forward and say, we're here to help the people, we're here to make things accessible, we want everyone to be comfortable entering this property space, because we all deserve to have a beautiful roof over our heads and be able to build a future and wealth for ourselves. Through property. So thank you so much.
No, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Listen, that's all I have for you today. I will be back tomorrow, still live from the property show happening at the Sandton Convention Centre right here in Johannesburg, South Africa. I will see you tomorrow.